In general, a 12-inch, 30-centimeter radius is sufficient, but the recommended depth varies because many roots initiate vertically along the stem. Palms are often dug from the field, mechanically or manually. It is essential to keep the root ball moist, and a burlap wrap may be needed if replanting is not immediate. Sandy soil has a tendency to fall away from the roots, which could lead to root desiccation, so moisture management is important. If planting will not take place immediately, it is essential to keep the root ball moist until ready to plant. Depending on the species and site conditions, research supports the removal of some of the fronds and tying up of the remaining fronds to reduce water loss and accelerate establishment after planting. The sable palm, Sable palmetto, seems to do better with all of the fronds removed before transplanting. Tie up the remaining center fronds to protect the sole bud or apical meristem during digging, transport, and planting because its damage or loss may lead to loss of the tree. The procedure for digging the hole for a palm is similar to other species of trees to be planted. The hole should be larger in diameter than the root ball, but it must not be too deep. It is a common practice to plant a line of palms at various depths to create a uniform height of the tops. This inevitably stresses the trees and can lead to health problems and often the death of the plants. Use the same backfill that came out of the hole and be sure that any drainage problems are controlled because palms tend to be particularly susceptible to problems from poor drainage. Large palms are often planted using a crane due to their height and weight. Skinny stems may need to be supported with braces to prevent breaking. It is especially important to keep solitary buds from snapping off. Once planted, palms are usually braced with 2x4s or 4x4 lumber. Make sure to protect the stem and do not nail the braces directly into the trunk. This practice results in permanent damage to the stem. In tropical areas, time of year for transplanting palms is usually not critical as long as water availability is adequate. In subtropical areas, it is preferable to transplant palms in the spring and early summer when rainfall is good and soil temperatures are increasing. When planting particularly valuable specimens, it is helpful to install misting apparatus near the top to minimize transpirational water loss. High-value palms are sometimes given a fungicide drench to reduce fungal disease problems during the transplant stress period. At the top right of page 105 is figure 7.16, a photograph of a large palm being transplanted. The caption reads, "Large palms can be transplanted with remarkably small root balls." Early care. Proper planting alone does not guarantee that a newly planted tree will survive its first growing season. As was mentioned in the previous section of this chapter, transplanting can be tremendously stressful to a tree. In an attempt to compensate for root loss and other deficiencies, several establishment practices are commonly used both by the arboriculture and landscaping industries. By employing some or all of these early care techniques after planting, the likelihood that a tree will survive and become fully established is much greater. Water demands. Transplanting is a major operation from which most trees recover slowly. Except for container-grown trees, a large portion of the root system is lost in digging, and a tree must re-establish sufficient roots to sustain itself. The tree's ability to absorb and transport water and minerals is greatly reduced. Varying degrees of water stress result, and the tree experiences post-planting stress referred to as transplant shock. The rate of recovery and reestablishment after planting or transplanting varies with the species, planting season, soil, site conditions, moisture availability, climate, tree size, and vigor. The general rule of thumb for reestablishment in temperate climates is 1 year for each inch, 2.5 centimeters, of tree caliper diameter. Therefore, it is sometimes possible for smaller diameter transplants to recover more quickly and outgrow larger transplants. In tropical climates, trees recover faster. Proper watering is the key to survival of newly planted trees. Water needs will vary with species, plant size, climate, and soil type. Water as needed, not by a calendar or a clock. Check the root ball, backfill, and surrounding site soil manually, and water when the soil 1 to 2 inches, 2.5 to 5 centimeters deep, dries out. At that time, apply sufficient water to moisten the soil to 1 foot, about 1/3 of a meter deep. This amount of water is 1 to 1.5 inches, 2.5 to 3.8 centimeters, on a light sand soil, and 2 to 2.5 inches, 5 to 6.3 centimeters, on a heavy clay soil. A slow, gentle soaking of the root ball is the preferred way to water. It is very important to monitor the soil moisture level of the root ball itself. Often, the soil or growing substrate from the nursery will dry out more quickly than the surrounding soil. Also, the ball may actually repel water, especially if it is wrapped in burlap. If the soil around the root ball dries out too much, root growth will be halted and the establishment period will be lengthened. If it stays dry for too long, the tree will not survive. Adequate water is critical for tree survival and new root growth. On the other hand, excess water accumulation in the planting hole, which displaces soil oxygen, is one of the leading causes of transplant death. When monitoring the soil moisture levels, always check the root ball itself as well as the surrounding soil. Watering must be appropriate for tree species, soil type, and drainage. Drainage, or the water percolation rate, can easily be determined within a couple of days. If there is any suspicion that the landscape soil is poorly drained, conduct a percolation test before selecting plants for the site and certainly before planting them. In the planting site or area, dig or auger a hole 24 inches, 60 centimeters deep. Fill the hole with water, let it drain out completely, and fill it again. If the hole is completely drained of water within 24 hours of the second filling, the percolation rate, drainage, is adequate for almost all trees. If there's water standing in the hole after 24 hours, only trees that can survive in low oxygen soils should be selected for the site, or the site's drainage problems must be corrected. At the bottom left of page 106 is figure 7.17, a photograph of an irrigation bag. The caption reads, "Irrigation bags are one solution to meeting water needs." At the top right of page 106 is figure 7.18. It's a photograph of two cross-sections of tree trunks, and the caption reads, "Because of recovery and reestablishment rates, it is sometimes possible for smaller diameter transplants to recover more quickly and to outgrow larger transplants." Fertilizing. Because the root system of a newly planted tree is limited, fertilization is not always recommended at the time of planting. Excessive fertilizer salts in the root zone can be damaging and can lead to increased water stress. If fertilizer is used in the first growing season, application of a slow-release nitrogen fertilizer is suggested. Nitrogen stimulates root growth and may be beneficial when applied in conjunction with proper watering practices. Mulching. Mulches are materials placed over the soil surface to maintain moisture, reduce competition from weeds and turf grass, and improve soil structure. Mulching is one of the most beneficial practices that can be done for the health of a tree. Mulch can also give landscapes a handsome, well-groomed appearance. However, if mulch is too deep or if the wrong material is used, it can actually cause significant harm to trees, so proper application is important. Although mulches are available commercially in many forms, they can be classified into two basic categories: organic and inorganic. Organic mulches are usually derived from plants or byproducts of industry, agriculture, or municipal waste. Some of the most common types of organic mulches are shredded bark, hardwood chips, and pine needles. The plant material present in organic mulches releases essential nutrients and improves soil structure as it decomposes. Although this decomposition is beneficial for soil structure and for the plant, it also creates the need for continual replenishment. The rate of decomposition depends on particle size, the material being used, and the regional climate. Straw, leaves, and lawn clippings will break down faster than bark or wood chips. In warmer climates, the rate of decomposition will be much faster than it is in colder climates. Inorganic mulches include various types of stone, lava rock, pulverized rubber, and other materials. These mulches do not decompose and do not need to be replenished as often as organic mulches. This characteristic makes inorganic mulches a popular choice for many contractors because minimal maintenance is required after installation. However, inorganic mulches do not improve soil structure, add organic material, or provide any nutrients. For these reasons, most horticulturists and arborists prefer organic mulches. Cover the area around the tree with about 2 to 4 inches, 5 to 10 centimeters of organic mulch. Do not place mulch directly against the stem of the tree. Direct contact may lead to bacterial or fungal infections such as crown rot or bark rot, adventitious roots, rodent feeding, and insects. The broader the mulched area, the more effective it will be at reducing competition from other plants and retaining moisture. The actual size of the area to be mulched depends on the size of the tree. For a 1 to 2 inch, 2.5 to 5 centimeter caliper tree, a mulch circle of at least 6 feet, 1.8 meters in diameter is recommended. Also, do not place black plastic under the mulch because it restricts water movement and oxygen availability to the roots. A broad mulch circle is desirable, a deep one is not. Excessive amounts of mulch often accumulate over time, largely due to repeated applications of fresh material to restore the color or appearance of an established bed or mulch circle. Although it may be necessary to replace decomposed material, make sure there is not a buildup of organic mulch. Volcanoes of mulch around trees can restrict oxygen and water availability to the roots and may lead to stem girdling roots or root rot. Overmulching may also limit nitrogen availability and affect soil pH. Mulch piled high against the trunks of young trees may provide shelter and concealment for rodents that may feed on the lower stems. Tree stabilization. Staking or guying of newly planted trees is not always necessary. In fact, staking may even have detrimental effects on tree development. When compared to trees that have not been staked or guyed, young trees that are guyed or staked for prolonged periods produce less trunk taper, develop smaller root systems, and are more subject to breaking or tipping after stakes are removed. Moreover, stabilized trees may become injured or girdled by the staking or guying materials. Some trees, however, cannot stand upright without support. Bare root trees, trees grown in small containers with loose potting substrate, containerized trees with large crowns, and large conifers may require support while they establish, especially in windy sites. In some instances, stabilization may be recommended to reduce movement of the root ball and subsequent damage to the fine absorbing roots. In urban sites, stakes are sometimes used to protect young trees from mechanical equipment damage and to reduce vandalism and theft. Normally, 1 or 2 stakes are used to stabilize a tree. If a single stake is used, place it on the upwind side of the tree. If possible, avoid driving the stake through the root ball because it can damage the roots. Stabilize the tree as low along the trunk as practical while still providing the necessary support. If the tree is secured too rigidly, it will develop a less sturdy root system and small caliper trunk with insufficient taper and may become girdled or break above the point of attachment. The material used to attach the tree to the stake should be broad, smooth, and somewhat elastic. One recommended attachment method is to secure the tree with a figure-8 loop between the tree and the stake to allow for flexibility. If 2 stakes are used, a single strip of flexible attachment material secured at the top of each stake will be sufficient for support. The stake should be high enough to keep the tree upright without the top bending above the tie point. Some municipal arborists specify that trees planted in urban sites be stabilized with 3 stakes. Triple staking provides more protection against lawnmowers, wind, and vandals. Trees greater than 4 inches, 10 centimeters in diameter, are often stabilized with guy wires. Trees are generally guyed with 3 or 4 wires covered with plastic sleeves that are anchored into the ground. Anchoring devices include stakes, land anchors, and deadmen. Placing guy wires low on the trunk allows the top of the tree to move freely while still maintaining root ball stability. Trees produce taper in response to wind-driven movement. If a tree is overstabilized, it may not develop the taper needed to firmly support itself. Attaching the guys above 2/3 the height of the tree is inadvisable because the higher the support is, the more upright and inflexible the top of the tree will be. A common guying technique passes the wires through a section of hose to protect the tree. The wires and hose are passed around the tree at crotches, and the wires are twisted to tie them off. This practice, however, is no longer recommended because the wire can still girdle the tree's stem, even if the wire is encased in a rubber hose. Guying materials in contact with the tree trunk should be wide, smooth, non-abrasive, flexible, and if possible, photodegradable. The wires that are attached to the stakes, anchors, and deadmen are subsequently attached to the guying materials rather than the tree's stem. Any modification to reduce girdling and friction will minimize damage to the tree. On large trees, guy wires can be attached to the tree with eye screws. This method wounds the tree but causes minimal damage to a vigorous tree and eliminates the chance of girdling by guy wires. The size of the eye screw or eye bolt used should be proportionate to the size of the tree. If the eye screws cannot be removed readily when the guy wires are removed, leave them in place. However, metal embedded in the tree could pose a hazard to a future chainsaw or chipper operator. An alternative is to use a dynamic cabling system. See Chapter 9, Tree Support and Lightning Protection. Check stabilization systems several times during the first year to be sure that they have the right tension and are not injuring the tree. Support stakes or guy wires should generally be removed after one growing season. If support systems are left in place for more than 2 years, the tree's ability to stand alone may be reduced and the chances of girdling injury increased. At the bottom of page 108 are two photographs. First on the left, figure 7.19, a close-up of ties around the stem of a small tree. The caption reads, "Ties should be broad, smooth, and somewhat elastic." On the right, figure 720, a photograph of a young tree stabilized with two stakes. The caption reads, "Stabilize the tree as low along the trunk as is practical while still providing the necessary support." At the top left of page 109 is figure 721, a photograph of a mature tree crotch where old support material has been left behind. The caption reads, "All too often, support materials are left in place too long and girdle the tree." Tree wraps and guards. Many early references recommend wrapping the trunks of newly planted trees to protect against temperature extremes, sun scald, boring insects, and drying. More recent research indicates that temperature differentials at the bark are greater with tree wrap than without. Furthermore, tree wrap tends to hold moisture on the bark and can lead to fungal problems. Also, insects often burrow between the bark and the wrap. These insects can be more problematic with the wrap than without it. If a wrap is used, it should be light in color and allow for air and water to pass freely through it. Although paper wrapping is often used, better materials, some photodegradable, are available and recommended if wrapping is necessary. Sometimes plastic or metal mesh tree guards are installed around the trunks of newly planted trees. These guards have the advantage of minimizing damage caused by animal feeding and from mowers and trimmers. Most guards are loose-fitting and may have slots or holes for ventilation. It is important to remove or replace trunk guards as they are outgrown. At the bottom right of page 109 is figure 7.22, a photograph showing metal guards often used to protect young trees in public places. They should not be left to girdle or distort growth as the trees grow. Pruning. Pruning following planting should be limited. It was once thought that up to 1/3 of the crown of a newly planted tree should be thinned to compensate for the loss of roots. This practice was known as compensatory pruning. Research shows that trees will grow and establish more rapidly if pruning is limited to removing broken or damaged limbs. Although the need for pruning at the time of planting is usually minimal, trees should be pruned while still young to establish good structure. Training young trees can greatly reduce the need for drastic structural pruning later. Many defects, such as weak branch attachment and codominant stems, can be corrected early, creating trees that are structurally stronger than untrained trees. Structurally stronger trees have a lower potential for failure. The leader is the central stem of the tree. Generally, there should be only one leader. If competing leaders exist, the strongest, most vertical stem should be maintained, while the others are removed or cut back. Follow-up pruning will be needed in subsequent years to remove or cut back newly developed competing stems and to ensure that the new leader is in a vertical position. The spacing, balance, and attachment of the limbs should be evaluated. Proper training of young trees to produce a strong branch structure is important. Generally, however, it is preferable to start these procedures after the tree has become fully established, approximately 1 to 3 years after planting. Trained trees often require less maintenance when they are mature, and training may avoid costly structural defects that require correction through cabling, bracing, canopy thinning, and codominant stem removal. At the top right of page 110 is figure 7.23. It shows a worker pruning a young tree. Pruning at the time of planting should be very limited. Planting specifications. Planting specifications are detailed plans and statements of particular procedures and standards for planting trees or shrubs in a landscape. Arborists often work with contractors from other green industry professions and must write planting specifications before they bid out work. Other times, arborists may work according to these specifications to fulfill a bid. The amount of detail and breadth of these specifications can vary greatly. When writing a contract, it is important that all of the key terms be clearly defined. What constitutes a healthy or vigorous plant may be different for each party involved in a bid. Timelines should be established for each step in the installation process and should include deadlines for any follow-up maintenance or inspections. The length and terms of any warranties should also be defined and documented within the planting specifications. Guidelines such as the American Standard for Nursery Stock, ANSI Z60.1, provides a system for sizing and describing trees and shrubs. The ANSI Z60.1 standard does not provide assurance of the health or quality of nursery stock. Rather, it serves as a tool for communication and to facilitate trade. Planting specifications should be drafted using the terminology found in the publication Best Management Practices, Tree Planting, and in the United States, the ANSI A300 Transplanting Standard. The Chapter 7